So my name is David Overeem, and I participate here with the Object Management Group as the chair of the XTCE Revision Task Force. My bio is on the event program, so in the interest of time, I'll just kind of skip over that kind of stuff. And thanks to Matt and Mike for asking me to stop in today to offer some thoughts on our experiences with the DevOps, DevSecOps architecture, and you were even nice enough to name my presentation for me, for which I editorially scratched out one of the words. So I just have to talk to it. I have to fill in all the empty space, right? So I claim that really no conversation about DevOps or DevSecOps can be complete without a ubiquitous figure 8 diagram. And I'm not the first to have now presented it. We only went 10 minutes in and you had one already. So, but if you want to be really one of the really hip, cool kids, you call it Sec DevOps. If you run into that yet, see, because security is first, right?
I'm already out of date.
So this particular variation of the drawing works for me, and in particular because it highlights a couple of points that I find particularly interesting, and then we'll kind of delve into those over the next couple minutes. So those points ultimately do violence to the promise that's built behind, software's favorite new portmanteau. So the first of these, it appears that few agree on the meaning of the conversational vernacular, or even which terms are preferred in the usage of both nouns and verbs. Programming language cultural norms even make the situation worse because they tend to complicate things by assigning a local vernacular to the various phases, right? So one of my earliest introductions to this portmanteau, right, involved a conversation that left me feeling like the Oliver Twist from the Dickens classic, saying, please, sir, may I have a business glossary, right? As we went through all that. So it may seem quaint, right? But I suspect a number of people in the standards community would be very interested. I don't see anybody here from ontology, although they might be, right? They could probably jump all over that. So that figure 8 drawing is not about mass market software, right? So if you dig into it further, it's about enterprise software. And take that apart one level further down, right? And it's really about what I would call bespoke software, right? This is the software that my bank writes internally for their internal website. The organization has control of both the development and the operations side of the house, right? That's not quite the ideal model for the software that my team creates. I would characterize what we create more as a packaged software. We could call it custom configurable off the shelf, or some people call that CCOTS, right? It's the same core software, but it's packaged and extended in a form that's useful to each of our unique customers. So in my organization, the figure 8 drawing looks more like this. Yeah. Perhaps others can resonate with that. I can already tell. In fact, I was reading over the bios coming in. I was like, I see at least 2 people who might get a giggle. But these annoying gaps right there actually lead to an opportunity that the community here can potentially heroically pave over, my broken promises that I suffer from the DevOps model. The 3 main drivers for these disconnects arise from a segregation of concern and interests, as well as the practical organizational boundaries. Noticing again off the speakers list as I was reviewing it this morning, domain boundaries would be the word we would describe that would result in quite a bit of a sneaker net going on, right? I've actually got one customer that still burns my delivery onto a physical DVD exclusively for the purpose of walking it across the room, right? So we understand, right? So after talking with some colleagues actually at Boeing, right, who have done this as well, I was able to identify perhaps a couple more ideas to throw at you guys. So what standards might help me? So quality and security scanning is a particularly important area. It's paid immense dividends for the software community, has stamped down probably trillion bugs. So, but we've gone so far as to characterize like many of the potential findings, right, with standard codes and symbols, right, to sort of represent common vulnerabilities that can exist in software. So these great capabilities also suffer from a dark side, and that when there's a finding, it has to be analyzed by someone, which means they have to write an assessment of this finding. The findings can be classified as false positive. Well, what's the net effect of that is that they'll end up being reported again and again and again and again. Even more concerning is the cost of having to do all of this same work, right, for multiple customer organizations independently of one another. Can somebody in the community help establish standards that would allow us to be able to certify credentialing and assessments such that organizations of a similar domain could potentially reciprocate trust amongst each other and accept a finding that's signed and appropriately performed against a software product, and then just simply repeat that reciprocally. So on a completely different point, someone presented this drawing to me some time ago. It's quite the collection, and I got a giggle as I saw you introduce things about tools, because it reminds me of a team and that I'm not making this up, and you probably might have encountered this team that was so busy integrating tools that they could not actually finish integrating one of them before the next tool would come along and be all the rage, right? So they changed directions so frequently that after 2 years, literally, of hard work, they had yet to deliver the first working piece of software to a customer through a pipeline. This was an example of when I walked in the room and I was watching a group of people work really hard at doing the wrong thing more efficiently. So be careful not to start a game of whack-a-mole with your tooling. If you deliver software at the right time, right, with the right code, then likely what's happening is that your engineering is effective, not that your tool chain is the popular latest thing. I mean, I go back in software programming to the 1980s, right? If your tool chain is Bash and cron, you can be doing DevOps and DevSecOps, right? It's not a matter of tooling. So to kind of extend a little bit further into something useful about what it is that we do that makes us different than a typical bespoke software operation, right? It's not obvious that pipelines exist in layers. So it's not a single pathway as you sort of read in the documentation. What you actually end up is parallel things going on and then things splintering off. In this case, for our package software, we have component version layers, which are sort of all the way there on the left side, right? And so towards the middle, we have what we call a domain, right, which consists of versions of several components at a time. And in the middle, we have sort of our software family, right? So this is a group of several of those domains. In the space area, that could be, say, for instance, a ground command and control system. It could be the orbital flight dynamics, which is a completely different domain, but yet all this software comes and gets packaged together. By the time that we're done, we get dozens of component versions getting packaged up and supporting COTS as well, right, to make up a family of a product. But these layers still do not result in a customer delivery. Customer-specific components are marshaled together with unique components, potentially, that get developed specifically for one customer and one customer only. And all that gets packaged up before you finally get a deliverable of your quote-unquote version, whatever that happens to be. And if you get this dance wrong, you will literally be paralyzed by your process if you happen to be in an industry like ours. So not only is DevSecOps nice to have, it is mandatory. We've kind of always done it, right? In spite of there not being a name. So the community may be able to help me a little further here. Can we use modeling to describe this process in such a way that the tools can be extended to operate or support underneath of a modeling notation? I find it helpful internally within my organization to use the UML to capture the big picture of the pipeline layers, what the triggers are, exactly what the input data products are, and exactly what the output artifacts are. Each of those has to be clearly defined at each step of the assembly, right? Or the whole thing just sort of falls apart. So, as to be cautious with your valuable time, I'll thank Mike and Matt again for asking me how the standards community could potentially better my DevSecOps experience. Hopefully I offered you something that you can take away. And I think I left a minute or two for questions if anybody happens to have any, or we can wait on that.
As you're doing your UML and you're analyzing the need, there's the technical analysis, and then there's the implementation analysis that is done by the organization that's utilizing the technology. In your view, what is the impact of the customer analysis on their sort of policy concept about what they want to do in relation to a standard development model? Is there a lot of flexibility potentially, or is there limited flexibility in that approach?
I think the big question, and if I'm understanding your question correctly, is where do you draw the organization boundary on the figure 8 diagram, right? Usually it exists somewhere in that release chevron, right? We like to draw it in such a way as to give the customers the ultimate flexibility, right? So although we allow them to look back at our process that comes to the assembled package that they're delivered, we kind of encourage them not to pay attention to that, right? Really to take it as an atomic unit and then incorporate that into a tool set that we can help them deploy if they don't have it already, that operates on their side to perform the ops portion of it. So in essence, we help with those principles, but we don't want to dictate them. So I may not have answered your question real well, because I'm thinking of a packaged software as opposed to a bespoke software system, right? And I'll be back at 3 o'clock for the Q&A session as well.
Yeah, we'll have plenty of time this afternoon for more conversation. Is it an easy question, Phil?
Yeah, just a quick one. It looks like taking packaged software and stuff like that.
That's correct, right?
Or do you take existing software? I mean, most projects, large scale existing systems. But similar to this, in that we apply security scanning as we transform the system. That comes in.
We do. Actually, we do quite a bit of that. And what we try to do is break those larger systems down into more atomic components. And then it comes to that complicated chart that I had at the end here, right? About how you start assembling these things up together, right? Because you can't eat an elephant in one piece. You got to take it in chunks. And that's the only way you can be successful, so to speak, bringing in-house a large pre-integrated system. That's, the heritage components, right? And then trying to modernize that through a deployment process, but also maybe bolt on some new components to it, deprecate some existing components. So it is a non-trivial process for sure, which is kind of why I called it out and added these 2 slides, because you read that textbook and it's telling you, oh, just do this one activity flow. I'm like, nah. If I was writing something for a cell phone, it might work that way.